Hi, I'm Dr. David Wallace. In today's Let's Played video, we are going to be looking at how to navigate the banjo or pizzicato part of Drawings for Meyoko by Angélica Negrón. Drawings for Meyoko was written for Janice, a Brooklyn-based flute, viola, and harp trio, which had the violist Beth Myers, who also plays banjo, ukulele, sings, guitar. And so Angélica decided to write a piece that featured not only her viola playing, but also her banjo playing. Something that's important to know about Beth's playing, she taught herself and developed her own style of banjo. So it's not necessarily fitting into the traditional claw hammer or three-finger banjo styles. It's more like Joni Mitchell, whose unique style of guitar playing is her own. Beth really wanted to have her own take on the banjo, and the way Angélica wrote this piece, you can actually play this on banjo or on viola. So I will take you through various stages of how invested you want to be in the banjo aspect of this, or how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole. So for starters, in the score, Angélica says you can play this on viola if you don't have a banjo or don't know how to play banjo. And so even within that, there's different things you can do to take it more in a banjoistic direction. So first of all, you can just play it pizzicato, putting your bow down, holding your viola in the regular standard position, and it works very well. So that was the first passage, and it lies very easily. The chords work just well. The second passage, the only thing that would be a little tricky is it does have tremolo. And how you navigate that is up to you. You could, in theory, try to do the same sort of motion that you would do for a bow tremolo. I would advocate maybe taking more of an approach like a harp would use in Bispigliando, where you have alternation between the index finger of your right hand and a left hand pizzicato. So you'd have more like that sort of approach. So it is possible to play Drawings for Meyoko without anything but your viola. Now, if you want to go one level deeper into a banjo direction, you can get yourself a thin or light gauge guitar pick, so very bendable. And you could hold your viola down into a position like a guitar or a banjo. And so you've got you would have much more of the plectrum kind of tone. So if you aren't going to play banjo or another instrument, I'd advocate get yourself a light gauge guitar pick and explore a little bit. I think you'll be happy with the results. When my flute, viola, harp trio hat trick first performed Drawings for Meyoko, I did not have a banjo yet, but I did have a mandola. And so it's essentially the same tuning as viola. The strings are doubled, and this is a little bit of a big one, but I can still use viola fingerings. And so it works very well. You can hear it's a little bit of a different timbre, but I found that was pretty successful. I also play tenor guitar, and tenor guitar was a little closer to the sound of a banjo, but you have to use cello fingerings. So that's a little bit more in the direction of learning a new instrument. But I advocate all violists to own a mandola. It's great for developing your rhythm, your technique, your coordination, and that's also a good way to play this piece. Now, We did run into one dilemma though, because we were flying to Bremen, Germany to record the Big Sky CD. Both my mandola and my tenor guitar are one-of-a-kind instruments and fragile and not something that I felt good about checking into an airplane baggage compartment. And I didn't want to buy an additional international seat for one instrument for one piece. So I decided to really look into what are my options for banjo. Because I knew that Beth Myers also played ukulele and banjolele, which is a combination between banjo and ukulele, I did some research into affordable shippable banjoleles. So this is a banjolele from a company called the Outdoor Ukulele. I will link it in the comments or in the video description. This is a synthetic body instrument. You can use viola fingerings with it. It cost, I believe, $315 plus shipping. And it's actually been a favorite companion of mine on trips. It can fit into a backpack. It can easily fit in a suitcase. You add a little bubble wrap. It's safe, it's hardy, and it works very well. It comes in two varieties. One is a head that is like this. It's a drum head, but it gets a darker sound. There is a clear version which has a brighter sound. And talking to the company and explaining the piece and sharing a track with them, they thought this would be the way to go. And so you've got you can hear it's twangier, it's closer to the sound of a banjo, and it works very well. One thing I didn't count on though was that the resonance of the drum head and some of Angélica's chords had some very dissonant resonances. So if you have, you can hear there's a little bit of a clash there. This chord especially had a clash. And so I talked to Angélica and said, what do you think about taking this more into a traditional banjo direction, and instead of having a broken chord, actually using hammer-ons? So instead of that chord, I can actually play an E, hammer on the F. And she said she was all for it. So, and actually when you'll hear the recording that Hat Trick plays, I use hammer-ons. So how do you do a good hammer-on? Well, essentially you need to be right behind the fret. So when you stop the string, the action of the string hitting the fret is what makes the pitch sound. So we have. Now, there were a couple of important modifications that I needed to make, which I need to share with you. First of all, usually a banjolele will use what's sometimes called an Irish tuning, or it's more like a ukulele tuning. So in other words, the strings are not like the viola strings. And so what you need to do so that you've got the viola pitches is you need to order a set of concert ukulele strings in fifths, C, G, D, and A. There's a company in Italy that makes them called Aquila. We'll link that so you can see where you can get that. The other thing is, like most ukuleles, the top string is actually higher pitched than the next one. And so in order to make the C string of the concert set of strings fit, I had to take a little bit of a metal file and a knife and just slightly enlarge the hole so that that way it could work. But again, those were minor and very small modifications, easy to make. So as we were exploring all the options, I decided to see, could I get an inexpensive tenor banjo? Because tenor banjo uses the same pitches as viola, and I also looked to see, could I get a short scale tenor banjo? Because the shorter the neck, the more likely that I'd be able to use viola fingerings. And after quite a bit of searching, I found a gem of a short scale tenor banjo. This is made by the company Harley Benton, and it is the HBJ 24 is a reference to the scale, 24 inches. So it's a short scale tenor banjo, and I got it from Thomann Music in Germany for $145. But that's the banjo you hear on the recording. So here, and you can hear even more clearly how those hammer-ons work. So, just a few things to help you if you're exploring tenor banjo. I had a good lesson with Dr. Greg Liszt, founder of the band Crooked Still, also professor at Berklee College of Music, where I'm the string chair. He said most banjoists, to kind of keep the resonator head in check, usually will put a finger on the head. You can hear if without the head, it still keeps ringing. If I have it in the head, it's a little bit cleaner. He also just really stressed softer approaches. The banjo, having a drum head and everything, rings. There's no problem in volume or dynamic. If anything, I had to make sure that when I was playing banjo, it didn't overpower the harp. So you can get by with playing very soft. You can keep your plectrum pretty close. Generally, you have the banjo neck at about a 45-degree angle. And same thing, if you sit, you can actually sort of prop it on your knees. And that's how I did the recording. And then the one last thing I need to give you some pointers on is tremolo. I spent months trying to develop an effective plectrum tremolo for the banjo. And the one thing that you need to know is tenor banjo as an instrument was generally used in Dixieland jazz. And if you look up tenor banjo tremolo, you will see entire chord tremolo. And it's a very loose, very floppy wrist sort of tremolo because you're playing 4 strings and to really get a really vigorous sound. So the tremolo we need, because Beth Meyer's approach to banjo is not like a standard Dixieland banjo player, you actually would be more interested in pursuing tremolo videos by mandolinists, where the hand is more stable, you are close, and you're doing single note tremolos at a time. I will link a video from the Modal Mixture channel, one of the best tremolos I've seen. But essentially, a few things you need to do: keep the rhythm of the tremolo even, keep everything relaxed and free, keep your motion small, and also notice what angle you're using with your plectrum, because if you're completely going against the string and having that kind of tension against the string, it will be harder to get across the string than if you're at slightly more of an angle. So what I recommend to develop a good even tremolo at different tempos is to set a metronome. You can even just do this on an open string, just 16ths. The first one may be more of an impulse, and the next 3 notes a little more passive, so like. And gradually getting it to that kind of fast tempo. But to begin with, just. Trying to keep the motion to a minimum. So you're really just kind of stroking the string, just going back and forth. I remember having a mandola lesson with Daryl Anger, where he showed just having things at a little bit of an angle and just really kind of caressing the string. And then eventually you can think less about it being measured, but just that sense of an impulse and then a little more passive, but keeping everything loose, never squeezing the plectrum. Okay, so let's say you actually want to be like Beth Meyers and play your part on 5-string banjo, because either you already know how to play 5-string banjo, or you've got one, or you would like to do it that way. I will show you a few ways that you can finger some of the parts so that you'll be on your way. Again, One of the reasons I was advocating for tenor is just simply you don't have to learn new fingerings and it's all within the range of the viola. However, if you do have a 5-string banjo, the patterns are relatively simple and it's a relatively light lift to learn the patterns and how to play it. So the banjo is tuned in standard tuning. And for the first part, the chord that you open with, you're going to be on the 3 bottom strings here. So we've got on the 10th fret, we've got the F. Then on the 8th fret, we have the G. And then on the 12th fret, the D. So that's that first chord. And then it resolves down to the C. And so you can just keep that position. And then you play that again. And then you're going to go up to the 17th fret for the high G. And so that's the opening phrase. So for the next chord, which is really kind of like an F7 over E natural, omitting the 3rd, you're going to go to the 9th fret on the 3rd string. And so there you have your E. Then back here at the 6th fret, we've got the F, and then on the top string, the 10th fret, and so we've got, and that's where that chord will live. And for the next melodic part, you can just keep it here on the bottom string. And so I would just keep the melody up there on the bottom string and you keep going back for that chord. And then for the last phrase where it goes up to the E and the F, you can take that on the bottom string up to the 14th and 15th fret just. And that's all there is to it. Now for the second banjo section, there's a number of ways that you can finger it. Probably the simplest and most straightforward is just keeping it all in relatively the same position, where what you can do is go up here to the 12th fret and then 14th fret. So the notes, you've got the D and the E, and then on the same string, the low D. And so you could simply keep it in position like that. And then for the tremolo, you just bring your finger up 2 frets for the tremolo E. And then you would eventually shift back down to where you played the chords in the first part. Now, if you want a little bit more interesting timbres, you could take it down so that you're playing on the 12th fret here, and then alternate between 2 strings, because we could have the 9th fret and then here 12th fret. So I've got bottom string, skipping a string, so that gets more of an African kora sort of sound. So you'd have, and then you'd have to shift up to catch the E on a tremolo, but that would give you a little bit more tone color. And if you explore your fretboard, you'll find many other places where you might be able to finger the notes or the chord. I'd say aim for, interesting timbre in line, but most importantly, aim for consistency, because you're switching between viola and banjo, probably putting your instrument down, taking the banjo, putting it on. You've got enough time, but not just a whole lot of extra. So keeping it simple is recommended. And finally, if you look at the video description, there will be a link to the recording where you can hear it. I highly recommend listening with Apple Music or Amazon Music, because you can hear it in Dolby Atmos if you actually have the immersive playback equipment. Thank you. And stay tuned for the next video, in which we will be breaking down the electronics and the audio and how you navigate that. Thanks, everybody.